Welcome to today's Explainer. Get ready to turn down the lights and lean in close, because today we're opening a dossier on something truly fascinating and honestly, undeniably chilling. We're going to be exploring a curated collection of paranormal case files drawn directly from the modern-day urban legends and deep-rooted folklore of India. Now, these aren't your typical, dusty old ghost stories. These are real, reported encounters that bridge the gap between our everyday anxieties and the absolute unknown. So let's dive right into it.
The switch was off, but the fan was spinning. Just imagine that for a second. You're completely alone in your flat in the dead of winter. The power is out, the switch is literally in the off position, but the ceiling fan above you, it's whirring at full speed. This is exactly where our first source file begins, and it brilliantly illustrates how the most terrifying moments often happen in the most mundane, everyday settings.
Here's our agenda for today's analysis. 1. Urban Nightmare in Gurgaon. 2. The Kasar Devi Entities. 3. The Smuggler's Cursed Watch. And finally, 4. The Allure of Fear. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Urban Nightmare in Gurgaon.
So, Gurgaon is this massive corporate hub near New Delhi, and it's totally famous for its high-rise apartments, bustling night shifts, and a real culture of young professionals sharing these expensive flats. According to our source file, a young guy named Ankush moved into one of these flats, and the terror escalated incredibly fast. In week 1, it started kind of small, unexplained power cuts and that eerie spinning fan we just talked about. But by week 6, kitchen taps were turning themselves on, and a lightweight balcony door suddenly became so unbelievably heavy it required literal brute force just to pry it open. But it wasn't until week 8, when a new roommate moved into the spare room, that things just completely spiraled out of control.
Now, Ankush worked the night shift, meaning he was getting back home around 3 or 4 a.m. One freezing winter night, he heard someone rummaging around in the kitchen. Naturally, he went to check, but it was completely empty. He went back to bed, but as the sounds of running water and clanking dishes just kept getting louder, he experienced intense, terrifying sleep paralysis. He was completely frozen in his bed, sweating in the middle of this freezing Delhi winter, absolutely unable to move or speak, all while this loud, aggressive knocking started pounding on his bedroom door. Suddenly, the door flew wide open, and Ankush instantly snapped out of his paralysis, only to realize the door was, in fact, completely shut.
The absolutely crucial point here is how this psychological terror manifested into real, physical danger. Remember that new roommate from week 8? Well, after becoming incredibly withdrawn, isolated, and just visibly deteriorating in health, he completely snapped one night at 2 a.m. He just started violently throwing things around the kitchen. It literally took 4 grown men to restrain him. The source details how this roommate was tossing his flatmates around like paper before they finally managed to tie him down with bed sheets and call for medical help. After the roommate's parents came and took him away, Ankush did some digging. And what he discovered was a horrifying truth that the landlord had intentionally hidden just for profit. Exactly 2.5 years prior, a young woman had tragically taken her own life in that very same bedroom. The landlord completely covered it up just to keep the rent money flowing. Unsurprisingly, Ankush immediately moved out, totally regardless of the financial cost. All right, so we're shifting gears now. We're moving from the crowded, concrete corporate hubs of Gurgaon, with its urban legends of haunted night shift buildings and empty metro stations, over to the total isolation of Kasar Devi in Uttarakhand. This is an area of ancient mountain forest that is deeply, deeply rooted in centuries of folklore and raw, untamed nature.
Section 2. The Kasar Devi Entities.
This next file takes us to a prominent hotel nestled high up in the mountains during those strange, super quiet days of the 2020 lockdowns. And the sheer volume of sightings reported by a young female employee here is just staggering. First, she saw a maskless woman in the lobby who ducked behind a pillar and completely vanished. And keep in mind, there was no working elevator and nowhere to hide on those stairs. Next, an incredibly heavy wheeled housekeeping cart rolled directly toward her all on its own, before violently tipping over. Later on, she actually reprimanded a guest for smoking in the hallway, only to watch him literally float into the air and vanish right out of a third-story window. And perhaps most chilling of all, she and her manager witnessed an entity in a white gown staring directly into a security camera with glowing red eyes, before it just disappeared entirely from the recorded footage. This next detail brilliantly illustrates the sheer panic these entities caused among the staff. So, a new housekeeping employee was tasked with collecting dinner plates from the third floor. Suddenly, he comes sprinting down the stairs, screaming for his life, just leaving shattered plates all over the hallway. He claimed he saw an entity throwing the plates, and as he screamed, he said the entity's mouth began opening wider and wider in a completely physically impossible way. Needless to say, the employee quit the very next morning.
To understand why this specific area might be such a hotbed for activity, the source material pivots to an exorcism witnessed near the hotel right at the edge of the Kasar Devi forest involving an entity known as a Brahma Rakshas. According to Hindu lore, a Brahma Rakshas is a fierce, incredibly powerful demonic spirit. But what's really fascinating here is that the source claims this entity wasn't just a random haunting. It was deliberately sent to possess a woman due to a bitter, unresolved family property dispute.
The exorcism itself is detailed in these vivid, almost documentary-like steps. Step 1. The weather suddenly shifted out of nowhere, bringing in this unnatural mist and heavy winds. Step 2. The exorcist demanded the entity leave the woman's body, but the entity vocally refused, claiming it was being rejected by the white light. Step 3. The exorcist actually forced the entity out and bound it to a nearby tree using ritualistic items. And finally, Step 4. When the exorcist threw a bag containing the ritual items into the valley below, it produced this massive, bomb-like explosive sound, which officially sealed the ritual.
Okay, so we've looked at locations absolutely saturated with negative energy. But let's flip the script for a second. Ask yourself this. What if you knowingly purchased a cursed object, but instead of ruining your life, it actually brought you immense, undeniable luck?
Section 3. The Smuggler's Cursed Watch. This bizarre case file revolves around an antique collector who visited a legendary, multi-generational vintage watch repair shop in Nizamuddin, New Delhi. While there, he purchased this beautiful, square-dial vintage watch. But it came with some serious heavy history. The shop owner revealed that the watch originally belonged to a prominent 1970s smuggler, a guy who dealt in gold and antiques, and who met a very violent end when he was gunned down in a massive police shootout at a disco.
There is a really bizarre duality to this object. On one hand, you have the curse. Every single time the new owner wore the watch to sleep, he suffered from terrifying, recurring dreams where he actually was that smuggler. He experienced the utter chaos of the disco, the gunfire, and woke up in a total panic exactly as the fatal phantom gunshots rang out. But then you have to consider the blessing. The owner claims this watch acts as his ultimate lucky charm. He credits it with miraculously saving his life from a severe traffic accident when he was just crossing the street. Furthermore, he says whenever he wears it to a business meeting, his success is absolutely guaranteed.
This quote from the owner pretty much says it all. I wear it for luck, even if I have to live a smuggler's death in my dreams. It shows this really strange, symbiotic relationship. The new owner is literally willing to endure the severe psychological toll, the residual trauma of a dead criminal, simply because his worldly ambition and his desire for luck and success completely outweighs his fear.
Section 4. The Allure of Fear.
Whether you're a firm believer in the supernatural or a total, hard-line skeptic, these source files act as a perfect mirror for our real, everyday cultural anxieties. Think about it. The haunting in Gurgaon directly reflects the immense stress, isolation, and vulnerability of young people moving to big cities and trusting greedy landlords. The Kasar Devi exorcism takes the very real, often super bitter reality of generational property disputes and elevates it to literal demonic proportions. And even the smuggler's watch speaks directly to our modern obsession with luck and financial success in a highly competitive world.
Which leaves us with one final thought to ponder as we close out today's explainer. Look closely at the stories we've unpacked today. Are spinning fans, floating figures, and cursed antiques simply psychological manifestations of our deepest inner fears and societal stresses? Or is there truly something lurking just out of sight in the shadows? Thank you so much for learning with me today, and keep questioning the unknown.